What is going on, Comic Fam? It's your boy, the Bearded Comic Bro, and I am joined by comic creators JC Barbour and Wes Watson. Welcome to my show, my friends.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. You all are the creators, and I'm going to have to read it. I have to pull. I never have to do this with a title, but I got to do it with this. Y'all are the creators of Count Dante, the unauthorized but sort of true story of the deadliest man who ever lived.
Yep.
Got it.
It's a mouthful.
It is, but I love it because, and we're going to dive into this really soon. Like, you're like, why would you have a title that long? But it fits with the writing and the art style and the story that you all are telling. But before we jump into that, I want to know, how did you guys get into comics? Have you always loved comics? Has it kind of been there, or is it something that you kind of fell into later in life?
Well, they're two different stories, right? So, I mean, I think Wes and I both in our youth, we were really into comics. Wes kind of stayed in comics, and I'll let him talk about his experience. But I was into comics when I was a kid, back during the heyday of the X-Men and all of that. That's when I was coming up. And but then I sold all my comics when I got a car and sort of went into the world. But at some point, years later, as a mature adult, I sort of started paying attention to them again. And Wes and I worked together. And so it started, we started talking about it. And I really started digging into comics later, like, the Tom King run with Vision, or, Hawkeye, My Life as a Weapon, that sort of thing.
Yep.
That was, I had been out of comics for years when I came back into it. We have a buddy, Adrian, who would like hit me to really cool and interesting stuff. Mark Russell stuff, with Exit Stage Left and the Flintstones. And so it was one of those things where I was like, I didn't even know, can comics do this? I wasn't aware, and it really kind of turned me back on as an adult back to them. Wes, tell them your story.
JC, you right off the bat, you're like, all right, how can I weasel my way into Bearded's heart? And you're like, oh, Mark Russell comics. I'm like,
are you a fan of
big fan. So I've had him on the show multiple times. He is a talented writer. So
yeah. And kind of like very oddly subversive, and he just takes these things you would never in a million years think that someone would do, and then he makes some things like Exit Stage Left. There's dialogue in there that I still think about.
So Wes, it sounds like you did not fall astray and you stayed the righteous good path of comics. So talk about that.
Actually, I went off the path for a little bit, but that was partly when I went to college, and then directly after college I went and lived in Wyoming for a while. And the entire time I was in Wyoming, I don't think they had, literally there were no stores, so I was kind of off then. But I just had to look this up, because I was like, this was really what got it started. Was October 31st, 1992, when X-Men Animated, came on TV. And I would say that really, because I thought about that, had that day not happened, I might be an accountant or something, because when that came on, I was, it was colorful. It was, I don't know, I think every kid feels like they're an outsider. And there was this whole group that was dedicated to, these outsiders. So, and I think that's what most comics do. They make people feel included. So
I love that. So often I have creators on, and I can tell like when I'm in the same age bracket as a creator, because they're like X-Men animated series, Batman animated series. I'm like, these are my people.
And Batman animated holds up. I love them both, but Batman animated, I will show to my wife sometimes and say, you got to see this, because they were doing things that they knew that like kids would like, but then when they became adults, they would come back later and say, man, I missed that. Like,
and it still is so good. And X-Men too, like they both hold up well. So I want to hop into then kind of how your journey is. But I gotta say, I got some beef. I always like to prep for an interview, and JC, I went on Twitter and looked at your profile, and you said you're a bourbon lover, but you have no pictures of bourbon on your Twitter profile. I was like, oh, I want to see like what bourbon's like. Nothing. Like, how do you do that to me?
Well, I drink them instead of taking pictures of them. They don't last long enough for me to photograph.
All
Wes
right,
can attest to
well
that.
said. Well, I respect that.
But yeah, if you want to know, I mean, I love Weller. Weller's my favorite, and then but yeah, but I'll drink just about anything if
That's
I can
so.
manage.
So it sounds like this is eventually going to turn into. We'll have you guys on again, and we'll just have some bourbon and comic chat.
Yeah, for sure.
We're
So,
trying to be we're trying to be professional. We don't know the protocol on some of this.
I
So
don't either. Listen, this is just a side gig, so like my viewers are like, it's fine. So we'll let this be the more professional one. Then next time you guys are on, we'll just buzz out the bourbon and have fun. So how did you get then? How did your love for comics? It sounds like you guys have been friends, kind of
We work together,
yeah,
yeah.
working there. How did that then
Yeah.
translate to let's make a comic?
Well, so Wes and I both worked at the Virginian Pilot, and Wes was a designer and a graphic artist, and I was an editor. And eventually, like how it is when you work at a place like that. I had multiple jobs, and eventually I took over a magazine, and then and a magazine division within the company, and Wes transferred over into my division. And we started, how it is, you're around the office, we just started BSing about stuff. And Wes is a fantastic artist. He did a lot of different art for us. And we started talking about it, and Wes, has a lot of love of nostalgic comic book things. We both are fans of like Iron Fist and Luke Cage and that sort of 70s era gritty kind of interesting comic era. And so it kind of like gradually grew out of just BSing back and forth about that sort of thing. And then Wes decided he really needed to make a run for it. I mean, that's pretty much how it went, Wes. And then you started talking to me about actually
yeah, we were talking comics a lot, and then it started to really get in my head. That I remember I was at a Christmas, and a relative was like, I said something about like one day I'll do a comic, and he's like, we'll do it now. And my first thought was like, what'd you say? I was actually kind of angry, but I did actually I think I got tired of hearing myself say, someday. So we started, kind of seriously talking about it. JC came up with another script that I actually think at the time, I was probably, like, I don't know if I can draw that, it was ambitious, I guess.
And it was literally my first ever attempt at anything like this. So there was a lot of like, Wes had to come back and be like, oh, when you write a script, like he literally had to tell me, like, when you write a script, it's like panel, blocking, dialogue. Like he had to like spell it out for me, because I just started writing, kind of long form with like I would in a newspaper, where it's like stuff and then a quote. And so he was like, no, that's not the way you do it. And then as we were doing it, we kind of came to the conclusion that story wasn't going to be the story that we could do. So
well, yeah, and JC said this the other night. I can't remember exactly the timing of things, but it sounds right that I quit. I handed in my resignation, and I think it was maybe a week before I'd ever heard of COVID, or what do they call it? It was just coronavirus. I still don't think I'd heard of COVID. So I handed in my resignation, and the idea was that I would go freelance and also try to do a comic book. But I think it was probably before that we'd had this conversation about Dante, because I was reading older books, and we go back and forth, because JC reads much more the newer stuff. He's read the old stuff too, but the old stuff is my comfort zone, so I'll read those all the time. And I don't know how many times I had seen the ad for Count Dante back in the 70s. It must have been in front of my face. But it's one of those things that after it kind of just got there, I started seeing it in other places, and we started looking up the real story, and it's just a rabbit hole, and he's fascinating and controversial, but there was so much there. And so we started talking about, basically, this guy wanted to be a comic book hero pretty much. I mean, he wanted to be the superhero, and we just thought, a story could be made from it, from the raw material that was sitting around. There wasn't a backbone to it, but if we could put something together and we could use some of the real stuff and some of the, you know, and put the glue between all these things.
Yeah, it was really kind of one of those things where Wes came to me with it and said, look, you got to read about this guy, you know, and he was very familiar with the ads. And if the ads are the whole thing, like if you see the ads, they're like iconic, the ads themselves. And the funniest thing was that, you know, Wes comes and says, you know, hey, we need to check this out. And we start going down that rabbit hole, like he says. But then when we started trying to figure out how we were going to turn it into a story, because I mean, if you guys get a chance, I urge anyone to go and just Google Count Dante and start, you know, looking up the stories. They're crazy. They're crazier than you would imagine, and they go all over the place. So that was the real challenge for us, was like, you know, how do we take this story? We didn't want to do the actual true story, hence why we have the crazy title, and turn it into something that we can manage, you know?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because you sent me previews for the series, and I was reading the first issue, and I read the title, I knew it all, but I was like, huh. And then it wasn't until I started prepping for the interview. I think Wes, I was checking out your website, and you were talking about this book, and you had said it was an ad that you had saw in a Batman book once.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like,
comic, I think, or something like that, right? Yeah.
And I was just like, wait, this is actually a real somewhat thing. And then I went down a rabbit hole this afternoon, just like, I'm like, holy buckets, this is buck wild.
Yeah.
There's a small, but, you know, still, you know, dedicated, you know, following to this guy. And just for, you know, for listeners, I guess, you know, just to really sum it up, you know, he was a martial art. He came from a rich family, but he decided to, you know, kind of be the next Bruce Lee. He created a persona. You know, he's John Timothy Kean, you know, from Beverly, and but he needed to, you know, create, you know, and I'm talking about in real life, you know, he created, you know, he was actually a good martial artist, but he needed something bigger, and so he created this persona. And you could actually, I think, you know, you'll find somebody that's going to say, well, he was a fantastic liar, you know, but then there were all these other, you know, there's these truths, and it's really hard actually when you get back and start trying to figure out who he was, you know, to figure out what he told people versus what was real, you know. But he became Count Dante, you know, and he lived as that way. And he was a hairdresser. He was, you know, a martial artist. He owned
used car salesman,
you know,
somewhat involved with the mob, maybe.
Yeah, and he definitely got in trouble with the law. You know, so these are all things that really happened. He really did have a pet lion. You know, he was a personality. If nothing else, he was a personality.
Yeah, and he was a guy that was like ruled by ambition, right?
Right.
Like sort of like this unbridled ambition. And he really, what appealed to us when you know, Wes brought it to me and we started talking about it, was also what a character for this time, right? Because this was way back then, but that dude lived a life like what we live now. I mean, he would have been on Instagram, he would have been on TikTok, it would have, you know what I mean? This guy, he was a self-promoter from way back, and he was very much sort of like it's like wrestling when you say Wes, like where like it's fake, but he'll whip your. Can we curse? Is this a?
You can do whatever you want.
Yeah. He'd whip your ass in a heartbeat. You know, he might not really be a Spanish count, but he would go at you. You know.
Yeah. That's so interesting. So we started to dive into the story of who Count Dante is. Where was a point, you know, when creating a comic, you're like, this is the route that we want to go of, you know, telling this story?
It was very early on. I think very early on. It was so meta. He was a meta kind of character. he was a media, savvy person. And there was a lot of little things, like the fact that a lot of stories talk about how he was in favor of, like, he was open to teaching everyone the martial arts, whereas some of his teachers were not open to teaching everyone the martial arts. And so there was a lot of little things like that, where we could find an angle to attach. And what we ended up doing was coming up with a fake character that could act as a narrator and would be like a person that he trained, because it always felt like you couldn't fully know Dante, so he couldn't be the narrator of the story. He always needed to be a question mark to you. Was he really the baddest dude, or was he kind of a con man? You should always be asking that question as the audience.
You need some ambiguity there of like, So Wes, was it for you, like, I said you read that ad, and that kind of where you were first exposed. Was that where you're like, I want to explore this character's life more, and like, let's do this story?
Yeah, I think that for me, what it really, it just like JC says, I think it was immediate that we thought we wanted to do something, because I think what we were struck by was mostly, how do people not know about this guy? And we didn't set out to do a documentary. We thought the best way that we could do this was, I think he in life, he aspired to be, this person, this character. And so instead of telling, because I'll go ahead and tell you now, in life, things didn't work out for John Timothy Kean the way he thought they would be. So the story that I think that the fiction that he created in his head, I think we were more interested in that and bringing that part to life. So we just knew that it was rich with potential from pretty much the get-go. I think very early on we got together over at JC's place and we talked about, I think we kind of started to maybe storyboard it, but then JC went back and developed it even farther. And when I first read the script that he got back from me, it was, once again, I knew that was great, and I knew that the story was great. I had never drawn, I think I'd drawn like a couple of pages in my life. I definitely never completed an issue. So, we've been kind of on this for the better part of 3 years now. Part of that was when I first drew the book, and book one, and that's actually what we sent out and got signed with Scout through. I actually ended up going back and redoing, parts of that, because as I got better much, quicker, and so by the time you're in like book three, you're like, this doesn't really look as good as I would like it to look anymore. So there were
by the time we were at the end, we both were like, God, this is like that's why we were like, please just keep reading it, because by the end we're really like swinging for the fences and every panel and every issue. But it was a growth. It was a growing period of trying to sort of learn how to operate in that medium. Wes is being modest. I mean, he's a fantastic artist and has done a lot of fantastic art. But he the deal, like turning words into a story,
right,
is a real gift and a real skill. And he's particularly good at it. But yeah, he started out and wouldn't tell me of all his struggles. It was only afterward, applied with a little bit of bourbon, that it all came out. But
see, that's why you always gotta have bourbon on the show. Right. The good stuff comes out. We've kind of beat around the bush a little bit of like what the comic's about, but if someone's listening for the first time and they can't pick it up, like, what is your elevator pitch like when you tell people the comic that you've written?
Sure. Okay, so in a nutshell, this is a story about a young man from Chicago who goes to Vietnam and comes back and wants to take martial arts world by storm, wants to become a star in the world of martial arts. And so he opens a dojo in Chicago and starts training, and in doing so runs afoul of the mafia that is operating in Chicago and is operating, in Chinatown in Chicago. and he is attracting some of the people that they would use to do their drug trade and that sort of thing, their muscle. And so he attracts their attention at the same time as he's kind of freaking out the karate world with a lot of his he would have these blood sport tournaments where it was just brutal, and a lot of the niceties of formal karate and martial arts combat would be kind of ignored in these things, and they would just go at each other, which was in keeping with his style of karate. So it's about him going through that, running afoul of the mafia, and then the fallout from that.
Yeah. What was interesting for me, and either one of you can speak to this. Again, I wasn't familiar with Count Dante at all, and then I was reading issue 1, and one of the things that I noticed right away in issue 1 is y'all have ads in your comic, which I freaking adore. Like the first ad, I think it is the pipe, and and I'm cracking up. I am laughing at the absurdity of it, and then the sea monkeys, and the next I'm just like, this is so funny. Like, why are you putting these funny ads in the comic? Because the comic has a light tone to it too.
Yeah.
And then it was doing the research. I'm like, wait, this spawned off of basically a comic book ad, and this is like paying homage, I assume, right?
Yeah. I mean, it just seemed right to have, if this all launched off of a comic book ad, to sort of lean into it. And yes, it's a satire. It's poking fun at the pastiche of 70s kung fu and that sort of era. And so the ads are definitely that, except the ads might be even a little crazy. And we went off the rails a couple of times on the ads, but it was just basically take these things that we remembered from that. All of those are sort of like parodies or riffs on ads that we saw. So
Wes, JC, do you guys have comics with the Count Dante ad in it still? Like,
I do, but I don't. I'm not sure where it would be. My latest acquisition, and this is not the ad, but this is the Black Belt magazine article that was right after he died. And the reporting on it was done before he died, and so that's it's not the ad that you're asking about, but it is kind of a
spoiler alert.
Anyone can look that up. He died. So
I mean, you kind of said that his life didn't go the way he wanted.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
But it's funny because as soon as I told y'all I fell down a rabbit hole like you said you would, and I did. And I'm starting, like, because you said a Batman comic, so I'm pulling out my Batman comic. Like, is this in the 70s? Where is it? I'm like, I couldn't find the ad. I was so hoping I could find an ad.
Have you not seen can you not?
I haven't seen it. I've seen it online. I haven't seen it in person. I'm sure I have it somewhere in person. I want to see it somewhere in person.
Well, it's you don't have to, if you just look through your probably early 70s comics.
Okay,
I think you should be able to find it. And I know they were running them in DC. It's not hard to find it, and I bet you've seen it. After I saw it the first time, I was over at my local comic book shop where I was when I was in Virginia Beach. And the owner actually had the ad taped to the main desk that we would stand by every Saturday, and I never noticed it and then afterwards I just started noticing it everywhere. And it's got the crazy eyes. So
yeah, so good. So Wes, I'm gonna ask you this then real quick. Then, how did you get into drawing, and like where did your art style come? Because it sounds like this is your first comic. I know you've done a lot of other stuff, but this is fantastic. So how did your art come about? How did you get into it, and inspirations?
When I was a kid, I wasn't great at sports, and I wasn't I knew that drawing for people was a way that I could make friends. So that was one of the first things. And then, but no, I went to college. I went for photography, and and so drawing kind of dropped off for a little while. And then, working in newspapers, it was you kind of, if you're working as a graphic artist in a newspaper, you know, you almost have to draw in all kinds of different styles, and anything that comes up, you know, you're doing vectory things over here and you're drawing over here. And so it really wasn't until we started doing this that I really started trying to, you know, get the comic book stuff down. I was always going to figure drawing classes, so I was ready to draw. Well, drawing naked people probably would have been easier because, you know, that's, you know, what you get at the figure drawing class.
That was the first draft. The first draft.
Yeah, no one had clothes in
just
the first draft.
Count Dante just
yeah.
It was a wild book. But no, you know, the first time you start drawing, you're like, oh man, clothes are hard. The simple things are hard. The two people sitting and having a conversation could be hard. And I have read every book I think there is on how to make comics in preparation that I was gonna, and then you sit down and you're like, okay, well, the knowledge is still useful, but it escapes you. And so what I would end up doing is, you know, I like to tell people, I think this is really interesting. I started noticing if I was drawing somebody, you know, smiling, I would end up smiling. If somebody was crying, I ended up kind of feeling what they would feel. And then especially for like the martial arts scene, I would be in my room and I would think about, how does this, you know, actually work? And so, you know, everything you see on the page, you know, it's I'm thinking like, you know, this is painful, this is or, you know, or like emotionally painful, you know. And so it kind of, it starts to finally click. And then, you know, I'm very proud of the first few issues. As we get through, I think everything starts to get better. But yeah, when I first got started, I couldn't tell you. I don't know exactly at what point things really started to finally. But then we were like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess we know how to make comic books now. So, you know.
Yeah, and JC, it sounds like you were already writing, and then you just had to learn how to adapt your craft to fitting into comic book structure. Is that right?
Yeah, to a degree. I mean, I was a journalist, a reporter, and a writer, and then an editor. But so I was familiar with writing. I did a lot of writing, did narrative writing. But you know, like every journalist at right out of college thinks, you know, I got a book in me, I can write a book. And then you know, you're 25 and you sit down and you ain't got shit to say. That's the problem. You haven't lived enough life to really, you know, it takes a very special young writer to be able to have that kind of imagination to draw on. You need a well that you filled up, I guess. But so I stopped and just went and focused completely on journalism. But it kind of was just fortuitous timing that when Wes came to me and said, hey, I want to draw a comic, I think you should write one with me. Had been dabbling in other forms of writing and was finding that I had the well was full. I was ready to go. I had ideas. I had the knowledge of how I wanted to tell the stories. And so it was just, you know, lucky, perfect timing. So that when he came to me, I was like, yeah, let's give it a shot. And then I kind of went in a deep dive for looking at modern comics and modern comic writers, and really kind of getting, because I think there's some really you know, excellent writing going on right now. And I hope that by the time Wes and I were finished with this, that it kind of achieved what I was going for, which is sort of a nostalgic feel, but like a modern way of communicating and sensibility. Yeah. So I think like there are jokes in it, but there are no jokes that you would have seen in a 1970s comic.
Right. So how did then this Count Dante come to Scout? How did you guys get connected?
Well, you know, the deal, selling it is almost it's, some would argue, a tougher gig than actually creating it, but I don't think that's true. I don't think Wes would ever sign off on that sort of thing. But we just, you know, you have to put a pitch together. And so Wes, it only took me like 12 or so weeks to write this, you know, the entire script. And then while Wes was working, Wes finished the first one and we packaged it. And then we wrote up a pitch. And, you know, there's kind of a pro forma way of doing that.
Right.
And so we wrote it up and sent it out. And I sent it to, you know, at least 15 or 16, maybe a little bit more than that, publishers. And we heard from 2, but Scout came to us real quick. They were like the 3rd day they came to us. And so that was really exciting. We didn't realize at the time how like practically unheard of that is to be, you know, to be so new in it. And it's like literally the first one we've ever created, certainly the first one we ever pitched, and to have it signed within 3 days was surprising for us. And I didn't realize how shocking it is until you now like go back and start writing other things and try to get ready to send them out. And you're like, shit, this could go out and they could just ignore it.
Right.
I think when we got started too, I mean, we were going to, you know, submit it, you know, to see if anyone would publish it. But I think in my mind, it was, we were going to practice for a little while, but let's go, you know, might as well see, you know, I mean, I thought we would end up doing like, you know, and then on another attempt, maybe, you know, but first we're going to figure out how to make comics. And it was
like Dante was going to be Dante was like the beta test. You know, we were going to do it. People would ignore it, tell us to go away. And then we'd be like, well, hey, we got this other idea. Let's do this one. And then that one maybe would, you know, but we got lucky, you know. And
the other part of submission was they all have different standards. So we just kind of, I think if we had the first one penciled, inked, and then 6 pages colored, that was enough to cover pretty much all the places we were going to submit to. And like I said, we did end up going back. I mean, even I'm pretty sure Clay went back and rewrote even as we were, you know, some of the later issues. So, you know, that first issue was the longest one. That's the one where we just kept, you know, we gotta get this right. So I guess that's my way of saying, like, I kind of understand why, you know, like Image didn't call us back right away, but we did keep going back and improving it. And that was something that was, you know, I can't say enough for Scout really, because they've given us a lot of leash to produce this. They've given us a lot of time to produce it. And we really, you know, I was saying this the other night, you're actually in a pretty good position when you don't really know how to do something, because you start to figure out how you're going to do it. And that's where all the books really had not helped me figure out with how we would make, you know, comics, how I would make comics and how I draw comics. And that took a little while to get going. So,
you know, I want to respect both of your times, but if someone's listening or watching this interview and they want to pick up Count Dante, what, you know, when does it come out? When can they get it? How can they get it? What's your salesman pitch?
Well, it comes out. It's scheduled to be on shelves April 19th. And you can get it at the Scout website. I can't recall. We've had it all sent to us. Wes might be able to remember the actual website link connection there. But
well, I'll have it. It's Scout. I believe it's just scout.comics.com or something. I'll have it in the link.
And then there's a link. We just got the press release like yesterday.
Oh, did you? Nice.
Yeah. And we can forward that to you. But yeah, so you can get it on the Scout website, and we highly encourage people to go ahead and pre-order it, because that always lets the comic book stores know that it's wanted. Or you can go and get it. It should be available at your local. You can ask for it through your local comic book store. Or
and that'll be April 19th is supposedly the release day, but they said, you know, every now and then things happen back and forth, but end of April. But yeah, it's on the Scout site, so it can be pre-ordered there. I've told all my friends, everyone that I can think of, you know, call up your local comic book shop, ask them to put it in a pull list. And because the reality with indie comics is, you know, it's not Marvel. They're not going to have a 50,000 issue press run. And so some of the smaller shops, they might not have it unless you call and tell them you want it. And so we did that. We sent out, actually, I thought this was a very Dante thing to do. We sent out a few hundred postcards to, to different shops, and we had friends, doing the addresses. I've got a list of those. So, really just, I mean, more than anything, I think we just want people to read it, So if I could give it away for free, I would, but I can't.
It's good. I was scrolling through my phone because once you said a press release, I was like, I think Scout sent me something. And I'm like, don't send it out just yet because I'm talking to him. I don't want other people to talk to him first. You guys have really created something special here, and I think it's a lot of fun. And I only read the first couple issues because I'm hesitant because JC sent me some previews. I'm like, no, I don't want to get ahead of myself because I'm going to spoil something, and I'm not going to do it. I'm like, I'm going to talk with them, and then as soon as I'm done talking and I make the edit, and then I'm going to read it because I really want to see how it ends.
Well, check it out. Yeah, I think we've got you up through 5.
Yeah.
So
so how long is this series? Is this a mini series, or are you guys thinking like?
Well, I mean, this run is 6 issues, okay. But I mean, if it ends up being very popular and there's a demand for it, Wes is getting ready to be a father, so his time is accounted for. So, but I mean, who knows? Never say never. If we have an opportunity to tell more of this story, I can come up with more of it. Wes can certainly illustrate more of it.
So you're like, Wes, get that issue 6 done real soon.
It's done. He's finished. We're waiting on colors, and I think that's where we are now, right, Wes? Yeah.
It's colors that's pretty much all that's left on 6. So
it's a lot of fun. I'm excited to see the response people get for it, because I think you guys it's such a unique topic, and I think like when people start to read it and then go, wait, this actually is based loosely autographed, like holy buckets. It's so it makes it even more intriguing to me. So
yeah, I think it'll be funny. It's certainly not the stuff that happens in our book. There's a lot more crazy shit in our book than in his life in one regard, but in another way, you'll be shocked how much that's in the book actually happened in real life.
Nice. Yeah, so let me do this. I'm gonna do this, gang. If you are watching this or you are listening to this and you've seen the Count Dante ad, man, comment in this video because I want to know, and then tell me where you found it, because I want to find it. I'm putting my people out there. I want to find where I can see it in real life. I've seen it online. I've seen podcasts talk about, but I'm a visual person. I want to hold it. I want to tangibly hold it now. So, man, it's so cool that's what's, one of the things that helps spawn this idea for a great book that you all have created. So,
well, thanks, man.
Where can people follow along with you two, with what you're creating? How can they stay up to date with what's going on?
Well, let's talk to them about your site and the stuff that you have going on.
Yeah, Wes Watson illustration. I have a lot of things that I bore my wife with, so I started a blog so that I can, let her ears rest. So I've got a blog on my website where I talk about some of this stuff. Most of the art is going up on Instagram. I have my Facebook professional site too, and just kind of different content. But really, Instagram is where I would say, if something comes up on my website, I'm still, talking about it on Instagram. And that's Wes Watson, or Instagram.com, Wes Watson Illo.
And for me, I mean, you can find me at Twitter at BarbourJC, but that's really about it. I don't, I'm brand new and doing this sort of thing, so I don't really have multiple things going on. But planning and working on things as we speak. So
nice. And I hesitate to always ask this though, but is this kind of only thing y'all are working on, focusing on, or do you got some other things that you're focusing on and working on that you want to talk about, or is this is it right now?
No, this is it right now. I mean, I have other things that I've been writing, and and I have one particular thing that I've finished, and it's pretty awesome. But that's about the only thing I'm working on right now is figuring out a way to get that made. So
okay. What about you?
Yeah, I'll be taking a little bit of break soon because I'll kind of have to. But yeah.
That's how it goes. That's how it goes. So, well, Wes, JC, thank you both so much just for taking some time out of your busy schedules to talk about comics and Count Dante with me. This has been a lot of fun.
It was great. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's Absolutely. Been a blast. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. So, gang, make sure you order in previews from your LCS. Go to Scout Comics. Get this book. Check it out. I think you're gonna dig it. But with that being said, hopefully you can find some time to curl up, grab a book, and nerd out. Peace.